Let's talk about something you probably see every single day, but maybe don't think about too much. Iron. Today, it seems so common, right? But this metal was once a revolutionary force, a technological breakthrough that didn't just change things, it completely forged the world we live in today. I mean, just think about it. Iron is literally the backbone of our modern world. It's in our tools, our cars, the very frames of our tallest buildings. Mastering this one material was one of the biggest leaps humanity ever made. But the story of how we got here, well, it's packed with some pretty amazing twists. And here's the first big surprise. Before we ever figured out how to dig iron ore out of the ground, we found it in things that fell from the sky. Yep, this cosmic gift was our very first introduction to the metal that would one day define an entire age. So let's dive right in at the very beginning. In our first section, we're going to look at how people first got their hands on iron, not as some common rock, but as this incredibly rare and almost magical gift from the cosmos. You have to imagine what this was like for early humans. You find this incredibly heavy, strange rock that fell from the sky. And it's not just any rock. It contains up to 90% pure iron, way purer than anything they could dream of making. The oldest iron things we've ever found are these tiny little beads from Egypt, from around 3500 BCE, made from this exact stuff. And get this, they were found strung together with gold and other precious gems. That's how valuable this stuff was. It makes perfect sense that the Egyptians called it skystone, and for the ancient Greeks, the word for iron was literally the same as their word for star. This stuff was truly out of this world. Okay, so finding space rocks is cool and all, but the real revolution, the thing that changed everything, started when we figured out how to make our own iron. And this leap, from a celestial treasure to an earthly technology, was a massive breakthrough, all thanks to a powerful ancient empire. Around 1400 BCE, it was the Hittites, in what's now modern-day Turkey, who finally cracked the code. They developed the very first method for smelting iron from ore, using something called a bloomery. But, this wasn't like the steel mills you see today. Their furnaces just couldn't get hot enough to actually melt the iron. What they got instead was this weird, spongy, porous blob called a bloom, and it was full of impurities. To get anything useful out of it, you had to heat it and hammer it, over and over again. It was incredibly hard work. This technology was such a game changer that the Hittites treated it like a top military secret. They knew what they had, and they monopolized it. There are actual letters from an Egyptian pharaoh to the Hittite king, basically begging him to trade an iron dagger for a pile of gold. I mean, that's how strategic this was. For a while, iron was so hard to make and so rare that it was worth 60 times more than brass. Now, for nearly 2,000 years, this super difficult bloomery process was the only game in town for the West. But while Europe was just hammering away at these spongy blooms, a totally different and frankly far more advanced revolution was already happening in the East. Let's see how they took things to a whole other level. Just look at this comparison. It tells the whole story. While the West was stuck making solid, spongy lumps of iron, engineers in China, by around 500 BCE, had figured out how to get their furnaces roaring at over 1,200 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to turn iron into a liquid. And liquid metal, cast iron, changes everything. You can pour it into molds, you can mass-produce complex tools and parts. It was a quantum leap in technology. So how in the world did they pull that off? How did they get those furnaces so incredibly hot? The answer is just a piece of pure engineering genius. It's called the water-powered bellows. An official in the Han Dynasty named Du Shi gets the credit. He basically harnessed the power of a river, using a water wheel and a crank system to automatically pump these huge bellows. This created a powerful, nonstop blast of air into the furnace, superheating it to temperatures no one else could reach. It was an industrial-scale solution. So, you've got this new ability to mass-produce cheap, strong iron. What does that actually do to the world? Well, the impact was total. It completely revolutionized the two foundational pillars of ancient society: how you get your food and how you fight your wars. In farming, it was nothing less than a second agricultural revolution. For the first time, you could make a plow out of iron that was strong enough to cut deep into heavy, clay-rich soil, land that was completely useless before. This technique, called deep cultivation, opened up massive new territories for farming, and more farmland meant way more food, which in turn meant the population could just explode. And on the battlefield, oh man, the effect was just as dramatic. Iron weapons were just better. They were harder, they held a sharp edge longer, and they wouldn't break as easily as bronze. Plus, because you could mass produce them with cast iron, you could equip huge armies with top-of-the-line weapons and armor, like the incredible Xianjia armor from the Han Dynasty. This gave empires a massive military advantage and let them expand like never before. And the scale of production we're talking about here is just staggering. By the 11th century, during the Song Dynasty, China was churning out about 5.5 million kilograms of iron every year. To give you some perspective, that's more iron than all of Europe combined would produce for another 400 years. That one number really shows you how efficient and advanced their technology was. Meanwhile, back in the West, that original bloomery technology from the Hittites was slowly, and I mean slowly, spreading out. You can see on this timeline it took centuries for this knowledge to travel across Europe. Each region kind of adopted it at its own pace, gradually kicking off the Iron Age across the continent. This kind of makes you wonder, though, right? We've seen these two major paths to iron, the Hittite way and the Chinese way. But was that it? Was the story the same everywhere else? Or did human ingenuity find other solutions around the globe? And the answer is a huge no, which is what makes this so fascinating. Human innovation went in all sorts of directions. In Africa, smiths developed an incredible variety of smelting techniques, and some evidence even suggests they might have figured it out independently, maybe even before the Hittites. In India, they used a unique crucible method to create the legendary wood steel, a super high-quality steel famous across the ancient world. And then you have the Americas, which took a totally different route. They never got into iron smelting, but became absolute masters of working with gold, silver, and copper for amazing cultural and religious artifacts. So, what's the big picture here? When you add it all up, what's the ultimate legacy of this material that first fell from the stars and was then forged in the fires of human ingenuity? The legacy is, quite simply, the modern world. The ability to make lots of iron led to better farming, which allowed populations to boom. It armed empires that redrew the maps of the world. It sparked massive social changes, creating new jobs, new social classes, and helping cities grow. And maybe most importantly, mastering iron laid the technological groundwork for everything that came after, all the way up to the Industrial Revolution and even today. You know, the story of iron is this incredible lesson in how a single new material can totally alter the course of human history. It solved ancient problems, how to grow enough food, how to defend yourself, and in doing so, it built our world. It really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? If the Iron Age shaped our past, what's going to be the defining material of our future? Silicon, graphene, something we haven't even discovered yet? Whatever it is, you can be sure of one thing: it's going to change everything.